Welcome back to another episode of the Startup Therapy Podcast. This is Ryan Rutan, joined as always by my friend, the founder and CEO of startups.com, Wil Schroter. Wil, this is our last episode of 2025. We're going to do a little December sabbatical. We're going to take a little break from endlessly talking about all of the things that make founders have all the feels in startup land. And we're going to do it on one of the topics that I think has brought out more feels than any other topic in a long time, which is what the hell is AI going to do to kind of everything? I mean, today, I think specifically we're talking about the fact that AI is going to create a whole bunch more startups, that startups are going to start popping out of everywhere. But because they're the future of employment, because employment as we know it is about to go away, right? We're about to see the death of the org chart. So I guess long live the Kanban.
I'll tell you what, I think what's fascinating is when people see AI coming and they see, hey, this job's getting displaced and this job's getting displaced, they look at that and they say, it's net bad. And I get it.
Yeah.
Look, I don't want to sound for a second like I don't have any feelings for the folks that are looking down the barrel of a gun right now. It's scary as hell. I've also been here before, right? In 1994, when I was running around talking about the internet's coming, this is exactly how everyone felt. Everyone basically froze in time 1994. And they said, look, if you sell something on the internet, then no one's going to go into a physical store anymore. By the way, some of that actually did happen. You know,
Blockbuster was right.
correct, right? They're like, what's going to happen to Blockbuster, right? You know, no one's going to watch movies anymore. Yeah, actually, they are. And what people always fail to understand at the dawn of a transition is how things look on the other side. All they think about, again, they freeze time and they say everything's is the way it is now. And I'll give you an example. You and I were talking about this. Before the Industrial Revolution, turn of the century in America, nearly 50% of America was an agrarian agricultural society, right? They're farmers, basically. What else would you do? Machines came around, and now less than 2% of our economy are farmers. At the time, everyone was like, this is going to be bad for farming, right?
Yeah.
No, people are going to eat just fine. We're just about to make a whole bunch of new shit. And,
Yeah.
and I think that all of a sudden created far more companies and opportunities and entrepreneurs, et cetera. And that's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if we look at jobs as we know them becoming obsolete, then I think we have to look at it as saying that, like, doing your own thing, taking an entrepreneurial path, becoming a founder starts to become ascendant, right? As roles evaporate, something has to appear to take their place, right? And I hope that ends up being ownership, and that people just have a little bit more agency over what they're doing.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about that is right now, again, this is the equivalent of everybody being farmers, everybody being employees. It's all people know.
Yeah.
But it's about to go away. Like,
Yeah.
and I don't want this to sound apocalyptic because this is more like it burns down only for the forest to grow 10 times bigger. It's just when it's burning down, it still feels like it's burning down, right?
You feel the heat.
If you look at jobs like a customer service job, customer service is going away. The job where you get employed to answer emails and answer the phone is not going to exist in 5 or 10 years. The time horizon does not matter, but I can guarantee you we will look at that as one of the most old school jobs that you could possibly imagine, right? Like there was a time when you had to like talk to a person. It reminds me of when people used to come and pump your gas at the gas station, like the 1950s, right? It sounds like oldie timey.
So you go to Europe.
Yeah. It's still oldie timey. But I think what we're looking at as part of this change is the death of big employment. I think the concept and what I'm calling big employment is going to be these massive employers that had, hundreds of thousands, millions of people in some case that hoarded all of the resources. And you could only be Amazon or Walmart or, if you had this level of resource, and that's going away.
Yeah. I mean, scale used to mean bodies. Now it means compute, right? Things changed completely.
Right. And so for the folks that, the idea was I'm going to go out into the workforce and those big companies are going to come and employ me and I'm going to build a career around it. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to, get that degree. I'm going to update my LinkedIn and I'm going to go work for Big Co.
Yeah.
That was a path right up until Big Co doesn't have room for you, right up until the job that you were being groomed for doesn't exist. I was talking to our CTO the other day and I said, if you were 22 years old, right? If you could go back to 22-year-old you, and
I mean, to be fair, he's not that far past that. But
That's also true. It's also true. But I said, if you could go back to that person now, what
yeah,
career advice would you give them? He's like, I don't even know. And he's like, get some work experience. I mean, like, I don't know that the job that was supposed to be the most highly sought after job will even be there anytime soon. Right. It's
right.
certainly not in the way that it was. That's a frigging CTO, right?
Yeah,
Like, this is like
right.
one of the
That's
smartest
that's
people we
top of the
know.
stack. Yeah.
Yeah. Top of the food chain being like,
Yeah.
huh, well, that happened.
I think it's interesting. It's like I feel like we're at this point now where we're starting to see labor and capital costs drop significantly, and so we're starting to see moats move away from money, which is what it used to take to start a startup, to momentum, right? Which is a
Yep.
lot easier to gain. And I think it's an interesting competitive advantage for startup companies because yes, big cos and big employment have a lot of momentum, but it's in a very particular direction, and we're starting to see what are they doing to be able to change momentum. They're shedding the headcount. They're necessitously they're doing that. And so the other thing that I think is kind of fun, right? If you can find some fun in all of this, is that what was safe is becoming less safe. And what was less safe, meaning the entrepreneurship route, is actually becoming more safe. You're going to have more agency.
How
And
crazy.
a lot of those initial barriers have dropped now, right? The things that used to be there that were really big and scary and costly have just kind of gone away. And so it doesn't have to be a moonshot to work anymore, which I think is super encouraging as we make this shift away from big employment as that ship sinks.
Let's look at almost everything that a company has to put money toward that creates their cost basis. And again, remember for folks listening, that cost basis is also a competitive moat for everybody else trying to compete with them because
Exactly.
they don't have that investment because they can't afford that cost basis. They can't afford 500 customer service people, so they can't offer that level of service
Right.
until that service is just an API that you call that has
Yep.
automated person that picks up the LLM that was trained on your particular business, right? Or pre-trained for your industry, so it already knows all your shit. Like, whoa, okay, that's sort of available to everybody, right? Or you look at your marketing staff or your marketing cost when it used to have a massive number of people to generate
Yes.
unique creative, to be able to manage campaigns, to be able
Yep.
to do all these
Keep
things.
eyes on all the data. Make sure we're reacting to every little movement. Right. You had to have
Dude,
a person staring at each metric. Yeah.
unbelievable, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
it's almost inefficient in the not too distant
Oh, it
future.
is.
Right. To
It
have
absolutely is. It
yeah,
always
yeah.
was. There
Right,
just
right.
wasn't an alternative.
Yep. And so all of the things that contribute to these companies being big companies are all imploding. Now,
Yeah. Yeah.
again, this is what we said at the top of the show. You start to look at that by saying, "Oh, well, all the jobs are going away." But you're missing the full picture, and we'll get to that. You know, we'll get to where that starts to change things, but I wanna say this. You've now done 2 things. You've let a ton of people who are experienced in the market go, okay? You've let in-house lawyers go because you've got AI that can do it. You've got highly competitive marketers go. You've got product developers. You've got coders. All these people you've let go, okay? Because AI can do the job. And you flooded the market with people who really need to get shit done to pay the bills, okay? Then, on top of that, you have prevented the absorption of all of these new people coming into the job market, right? That are like, hey, I'm going to go to college to learn X. And like, all the jobs go away. Not quite that apocalyptic, but
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. But
right?
yeah.
Because remember, it's two forces converging as one. When Google lets go of a whole bunch of engineers, the first place those engineers get reabsorbed is in other companies that still need engineers at the
Yep.
expense of anybody new coming into the market,
Correct.
right? This happens all the time, during recessions, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah.
Experienced people basically take the job away from inexperienced people.
Yep. We saw this during COVID.
100%. 100%.
Yep.
And so what ends up happening is you create this vacuum of lots and lots and lots of people who need to make something happen. That is exactly how companies get started. And sometimes it's fear, sometimes it's greed, sometimes it's both. But we are going to have an absolute flood of humans all around the world that all need to get something done practically overnight.
Got to be a whole lot of motivation to start something because there's not going to be anything for you to just walk into. And so we're hopeful, right? We're hoping that the unemployment line turns into the incorporation line, right? So that like people are just out of labor and you got to go somewhere at some point. You got to do something. And so I mean, again, this is our hope. This is what we hope we see happen. I mean, there's a lot of ways that this could go.
Played out. I'm a 33-year-old computer engineer, or a developer, right? And I get displaced from whatever corporation because you
Yep.
only need a fraction of the developers to do my job anymore. Okay, and I'm using a developer specifically because this is a highly employable person at present.
Yep.
I look around for jobs, and the problem is every other company, or almost every company, is kind of shedding in the same way, right?
Yeah.
So it's not only the fact that they're not hiring, they're also flooding the talent pool with my competition, right?
Yep.
The people that I'm otherwise trying to take their job, and they don't even have a job, right? So now it doesn't take me long to realize that me getting reabsorbed into the bloodstream of big corporate ain't going to happen. And at the same time, realizing the only way I'm going to get paid is if I control my destiny. Combine that with all the people coming into the market being, shit, there's no jobs. In both cases, we create a condition that says, look, man, from now on, if you want to eat, you got to hunt and kill your own stuff, right? Which is how this starts.
The challenges now are around like capability velocity. Like, what are you able to do, and how do we leverage that? So as we start to see big companies shedding staff, as that starts to stop up the entire works, as you just described, meaning that new incumbents, like people, the incumbents are there, you got new people coming in, there's nowhere for them to go. I think the way we look at that in part is that, yes, that starts to happen at the employment level, but my hope is that at the company level, that the big incumbents don't stop the smaller players from coming in, right? That there is room in there to be able to learn, ship, iterate faster than those big incumbents, and to take little bits of market share. I mean, for a long time, I mean, basically since the internet started, right? So we go all the way back. Like we think about how things have progressed. You know, we went from being agrarian to industrial to PC to internet to AI.
Yeah.
We moved from muscle to machine to software to models. My hope has been, really since the beginning of the internet, was that this would allow people with really small ideas, really narrow, like they just want to serve like this really specific population. Now all of a sudden they can, right? They can just go out. I will always go back to this clarity call I had with a guy that wanted to start a business to build and ship, like basically like modular, ready to pop up chicken coops, right? Imagine trying to do that before the internet, before you could reach all the backyard chicken farmers at scale. Never work, right? Like how would you find them all, right? But the minute you can aggregate that demand globally, well, this was just nationally, this is in the US, all of a sudden you've got a business. And so I guess my hope is that we start to see people just attack these really micro niche type businesses and be able to grow millions and millions and millions of them. And again, I think we're at a really interesting point. AI is both going to create the need to do this, but the cost of tech, the cost of deployment, the cost of customer service, all these things coming down actually allow you to do that, right? Because you can't build a 60-person company that does what he wanted to do. But you can build a 2-person company, particularly if the tech that you want to build, the infrastructure, the email, the e-commerce, all that stuff costs peanuts compared to what it cost even 10 years ago to do that. And I think so the conditions are being created on both sides, both the condition of necessity that we have to go do this, but the conditions that make it possible at the same time, which is where a lot of hope is coming from right now for me.
When the cost of entry, see, that's the part that people are missing. They keep, we're losing jobs. Yeah, but we're also bringing down the cost of entry, which, by the way, is a huge problem for big companies who survived a very long time because they had the moat of being a big company.
Yeah.
Here's a great example of watching this in action, okay? In, let's say, the 1980s. We're not going that far back. In the 1980s, there were basically 3 dominant networks in the United States, right? Television networks. And if you wanted to be on TV, you had a number of time-based slots, from the evening news to, late night with Johnny Carson. And that was it. That was it. That was all that was available. And there was a very small number of companies that controlled that flow. Okay. Now you fast forward to today, literally anybody can have their own show, right? My 9-year-old son has a YouTube channel. Okay. The highest paid person in Hollywood is some 20-something-year-old dude in North Carolina, Mr. Beast, right? Like, who's never acted a day in his life, right? Like, I don't think when people see the snowball effect here, they really understand these knock-on effects. So let me explain.
Yeah.
It's not that Mr. Beast is Mr. Beast. It's number one, that there's no longer a gatekeeper to his success. He did nothing special. He's worked his ass off, but like he did nothing unique or special, right? He's just some random dude that made content. But here's what happened. A whole bunch of other people started to make micro content. They became influencers in all of these categories you couldn't possibly imagine. I know like 10 people in the woodworking business, like, this very specific niche business that have 7-figure incomes off of their YouTube channels, right? talking about building fucking birdhouses, right? So let me build on that, okay? Here's what happens. A whole bunch of people that see them do it go, oh, I guess a creator could be a job. It wasn't 5 minutes ago, but I guess it's now a job. My son thinks he can be a creator. Maybe he can.
And he can, right? I think that's what's so amazing about the whole thing is that we had a couple things come together at the same time, right? Your cost of creation hits near zero marginal cost, right? So curiosity essentially goes infinite, right? Curiosity goes infinite, right? This is why little Will can go and be like, hey, I'm curious. I'm going to go try this. There's no cost to him doing that. And then on the other side, to your point, the gatekeeping around distribution essentially became infinite at the same time. So when creation cost hits zero and distribution becomes unlimited, all of a sudden you have these crazy, crazy conditions for kind of as many people as want to enter the market with their own specific thing can exist, right? There really isn't an upper limit to it.
That's only the start. Because a moment ago, when you were saying, hey, there's all these micro markets, right?
Yep.
Woodworkers showing you how to build birdhouses or DIY your living room or something like that is a very specific market. Cool, right? However, there's now huge markets of people who make software for creators. There are now huge markets of agencies that help promote creators, right? Like,
it's the picks and shovels for miners, right? Like the tools that are required to mine the gold.
none of this stuff existed like 5 years ago. Now someone's going to say, "Oh no, there's this one thing. There was Teal Tequila on MySpace in 2007." Like, dude, no, that's that was a glimpse of what's coming, right? It has nothing to do with where we are today, and where we are today is a glimpse of where we're about to be. This illustrates so beautifully and so visibly where we're headed. Because when you take two things happen. You took the cost to enter to go to almost zero. You don't have to be NBC anymore. Okay, that's a big deal. Second thing, you took the change in consumption so that anybody could consume it anywhere. The moment YouTube was viably streaming on a phone, it changed everything, right? It changed everything. When you bring down the cost of consumption and the cost of production at the same time, crazy shit happens.
Yeah. I mean, dude, it's the internet playbook repeating itself in a slightly different way. Unit costs fall, consumption swells, new categories emerge. This is the same thing happening again. And I think we'd all be foolish to think that it all ends in disaster or that it's not going to happen. Right? Like, I think it is happening.
No founder worth their salt can overlook how every time there's a sea change like this, it creates 100x more opportunity than it tears down. Again, having lived through the internet, I've been through this Chicken Little scenario before, right? It was the internet's coming. It's the death of all business. Everything's going to be an e-business and regular businesses won't exist. Number one, nothing happens that fast because people are dumb and slow, right? So, trust me, I tried to move people faster and it took a long time. But the second part is what we fail to understand is how that new change creates far more opportunities than there were before. You see, when we have like a let's call it a slower paced society, right? The farming community before we were an industrialized community, the industrialized community before we were a computer information tech community, computer industry before the internet, and of course the internet before AI. What we keep missing is we keep thinking that everything should play by the same rules. It's just fucked up over this new thing. When computers came out, accountants were like, I guess no one's ever going to need accounting, right? I guess we're done with accounting, like I'd put away the abacus, right? And they fail to understand that it's going to create so many more companies, right? All of the most profitable companies in the S&P 500, not all of them, but most of them, are companies that didn't exist 10, 20, 30 years ago.
Not only did they not exist, they would have been inconceivable 20 or 30 years ago, right? So many things have changed that just like couldn't exist. There's entire categories, there's entire industries based on things that could not have existed even 10 or 15 years ago.
Dude, right? Can you imagine trying to explain social media in the 70s? Yeah, or the fact you'd have a phone that wasn't connected to your house, right?
Yeah, I mean, dude, our home screen on our phone is literally a museum of yesterday's impossible.
Yep.
Right? Like none of that shit could have happened, right? You couldn't have had any of that. And now we literally carry around a bunch of impossibilities in our pocket, right? And it will continue to repeat and scale.
Something that's really funny about everything we talk about here is that none of it is new. Everything you're dealing with right now has been done 1,000 times before you, which means the answer already exists, you may just not know it, but that's okay. That's kind of what we're here to do. We talk about this stuff on the show, but we actually solve these problems all day long at groups.startups.com. So if any of this sounds familiar, stop guessing about what to do. Let us just give you the answers to the test and be done with it. So you have two things happening at the same time, and I'm always fascinated by macroeconomics. One is that the cost of consumption, the cost of production rather, comes down exponentially. Okay. On so many things that you can't even quite wrap your head around. I'll give you an example. For retailers, traditional retailers, let's say it's a Best Buy or it's, Abercrombie and Fitch, you name it, or somebody doing more traditional retail. Their biggest issues, biggest cost centers that drive them insane, aside from making sure they have the right products, in merchandising, are customer service, right? It's a hard cost that you want to invest in as little as possible, but not too little because you don't want the thing to go sideways, right? That goes away. Retailers who work off of a razor thin margin, if you can all of a sudden say, here's 5% of your P&L that doesn't exist anymore, and you can go reinvest that, they get bigger, right? Here's the other thing that happens. How many times are you on social media and you see ads for some random clothing company, right, that you've never heard of before? And every time you click, you go straight to a Shopify site, right, which got set up 5 minutes ago, and it's something shipping from China. The cost to be Abercrombie, right, has gone to almost frigging zero. The cost to be able to retail fashion, right, to design it, to set up your supply chain, to get it out there and sell it, to service the demand, the returns, everything else is just plummeting.
Lower cost grows the long tail, right? And the long tail is exactly where founders feed.
The creator economy is the essence of long tail. Yes, Mr. Beast, and there's some other folks at the top. There always is. Same with podcasting. For what we do, there's the Joe Rogans of the world, but for every Joe Rogan, there's a billion people in the long tail. We have some number of people that are really passionate about this topic that have listened to us for years, and that's awesome. But that's all we need. Like, we don't have to be Mr. Beast in order for this to work. It's amazing. And so, again, two giant forces converging. You've got the cost of building stuff going down exponentially. On the other side, you've got the ability to consume because costs are coming down, meaning products come down, and there's more products in the market going up incredible. Here's an example. This is probably a bad example because it's the biggest hard good I can think of, which would be a house. If a house back in the day, you had to chop down the lumber yourself and kind of mill it yourself in your backyard, cost 10 years took 10 years to build, probably not, but let's just pretend. You get one house, right? Like that's kind of it. And that house is going to go on to your kids and their kids and their kids. Like,
you certainly weren't thinking of moving every couple of years.
Absolutely not. You're like, I don't like this neighborhood. Let's go. So it's like, no, dude, like grandpa built this house. We don't need a house anymore. And in most countries, that's still the way, by the way. But a crazy thing happened. One day on the job site, a dude showed up with a power saw, right? A circular saw, a chainsaw, whatever, and was like, hey, I can cut that down faster. Now, initially, the damn lumberjacks and craftsmen were like, well, fuck you, right? You just took my job. Now people, won't need lumberjacks or craftsmen. Not true. Now you can build houses faster, which makes them cheaper, which means more people can buy them. Now, all of a sudden, more people have houses. You know what happens when more people have houses? They need curtains, lawnmowers, furniture, like all of these things. Right. Like I call them nodes, where you create a new node and that new node expands to lots of other demand categories. Look at your phone right now. Every app on your phone likely represents a company that didn't exist before, right? 10, 20 years ago, but it's likely $1 billion company if it made it to your phone. Uber, when it came out, people are like, oh, it's going to upset the taxi industry. Uber had 1.5 million people in the state of California alone, this is years ago, that they employed in some capacity for a service no one had even conceived a few years prior. It's all of a sudden, when you lower the cost of things, when you introduce new vectors, you get so much more demand, which guess who services demand? Startups, quite specifically. That's how these things get created.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, because as we start to look at things like just price collapse, right? Where do those create an opening for premium experiences too, right? So it's not just a race to the bottom in terms of costs, but when we drive costs down on things that weren't actually the important part, when we have to pay for things like transglobal shipping, right, as opposed to micro local production, we're not just driving the price down to zero. We're just creating an opportunity to have something way better at the same price, right?
Right.
Or to create a premium experience because we don't putting cost and money into things that didn't actually pass through to the consumer in a positive way. And so I think there's all kinds of super interesting things that can happen there. And by serving a smaller audience, at least like theoretically, you can give a lot higher love, right? Like
Right.
if you and I had to respond to the number of people that Joe Rogan responds to, our responses would be a lot briefer. As it is right now, you and I each write about a page and a half to everybody who ever has said hi to us, which means that your net promoter score is up, your retention's up, your average revenue per user goes up. All of these things happen, which is net positive, not net negative.
Every one of those startups that gets created, this is the part people are missing, creates infinitely more jobs, which then go on to create infinitely more jobs. Again, that's the part. Like Amazon didn't make retail go away. They moved retail to online. I mean, to the extent that they did. Walmart's still around. They're still doing okay. But now they have like 1.5 or 1.6 million people that they employ at generally fairly high wages, warehouse workers notwithstanding, around jobs that just simply didn't exist before.
Yes.
Where this gets interesting is AI is fundamentally a creation engine. That's quite literally what it's generative. It creates new shit. So as founders, our ability to use AI to help us concept new stuff, which you and I do all the time, right? Then use AI to help us bring it to market, then use AI to help keep us in market, by virtue of marketing and customer service, means so many more people come to the plate. Now, when a lot more people come to the plate, they're not just going to do the same exact thing. It's not one person selling lemonade, the next person selling lemonade, the next person selling lemonade. Each new person has to say, well, nobody's selling pink lemonade. Well, no one's selling berry lemonade. Well, no one's selling lemonade with caffeine. No one's selling right? And all of a sudden, the choices get staggering. Once again, similar to the creator economy, if you look at something like Spotify and what it's done for music, in the same way, how before becoming a creator meant you had to get signed by a label, et cetera. Spotify all of a sudden put every song that's ever been made in your pocket for $20. Do you remember like back in the day going to the CD store and you get to pick one artist, right? In the same way you used to only get to pick one video game, right? And it's like, I can picture this. I remember sitting in those plastic CD racks going through and trying to figure out like, am I going to get Digital Underground or Metallica? Because these were two very big choices, in that era. And that's all I could get. And so I couldn't take a chance that I was going to spend my money on anybody that wasn't a proven commodity. Now, by the way, GPT is connected to Spotify now. So I was using it last night and I was having to go through all my music and like create all new playlists and stuff. And what I told it, I said, give me people I've never heard of before. Give me exactly what my tastes are.
Yeah. It's like,
give me people
don't
I've
worry,
never heard
we
of
got
before.
plenty of those now.
Right. Now think of how many artists I'm about to listen to that I would have never had a mechanism to ever find. And now all those people have a new source of income. They're going to get, some fraction of a penny.
But it's more than they would have been paid before. So this is super interesting. And I want to stick on this for a second because this actually touches on a bit of devil's advocacy that happened in a conversation a few weeks ago where we were just starting to play around with this and say like, okay, and we picked sports in that case. You've just done it with music. But we picked basketball and we said, okay, but so if things start to fractionalize and there's just a whole bunch of niches, does this mean that essentially like rather than watch NBA games, and we're just using it as a metaphor, right? Not truly like, but are people going to want to go watch community basketball instead? Meaning like as we niche down and we try to create things that are more special, well, okay, but that's not really niching. That's just going to a probably lower quality of output. And so we were trying to decide like what that looks like, right? So I think music's a really interesting one. Because it's nearly infinite, right? In terms of the amount of creativity you can apply, like the number of ways you can combine stuff. There were some other things like sport, for example, right? Like, I don't think that just because we could create micro leagues that all of a sudden everybody wants to consume and watch, your neighbor's team play as opposed to the LA Lakers.
Let me give you a different version of that. eSports, right?
Yep.
Who the fuck saw that coming, right? Who saw
all
that
of us sweaty nerds in the 80s were just hopeful for it.
No, I mean, I was just thinking about this morning. I've got a younger brother, and our best pastime as brothers would be to sit in front of our Commodore 64 computer and play every game like pixel by pixel, right? Because back then you had to relish your game because there wasn't another one after it. And I just think of all the great times he and I had, like just scarfing down Doritos like till 4 a.m. playing like Wasteland, that right? Yeah, no, going deep, right? But my point is, back then we had very few options for consumption. And back then the idea that we'd someday there would be professionals who do what we do, right? would seem bananas, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
now e-gaming is a massive, massive target market, right? For it's incredible. Like I've had some friends who are invested in that industry saying it's bigger than traditional sports, and I actually just don't believe it, but it might be. For all I know.
From an access distribution, I mean, yeah, I could see how it could be,
Yeah.
right? Because you remove the physicality and the necessity of some of the stuff that has to happen with traditional sport. But
But it goes back to what you're saying. It's like you were thinking about will there be a smaller league of the NFL or something like that? Maybe not. Maybe it'll be a league of something like virtual sports is going to be a massive, massive industry. And so you will have entire teams of virtual athletes for games that you can't even fathom right now, the equivalent of
right,
Fortnite, right? For games that you can't even fathom right now, that are going to be the biggest shows for shows that don't even exist, and those are going to be
yep,
careers. In addition, there's going to be a ton of people who service all of those people, right? The
yep.
people who make the VR headsets, the people who make, like, this Ready Player One style, right? The people who make the gear, the people who sponsor it, like it creates this whole new economy on top of
People who come by and sell the hot dogs and popcorn at your house now because you're no longer at the stadium, right? Like we'll
that.
we'll find a way. Some founder is going to do it.
So, but okay, some founders going to do it. So let's bring it back to the core here. The point of all this, and this is like 1994 internet all over again, except on steroids. Think of how many founders were born in the era of the internet. And I want to take you back, Ryan, because we grew up at the same time. When I was coming into this market in 94, I was starting, one of the first web design companies. And at the time, no one had ever heard of the internet, no one had ever heard of web design, and certainly nobody had ever heard of me. But more importantly, I had never heard of founders before. Like Michael Dell was a thing back then. Bill Gates was a thing, but they were like total one-offs and nobody really thought much about it. And that was the beginning, the very beginning, the dawn of the young CEO. People don't think about this anymore because it's like, of course, there's young CEO. Mark
Yeah,
Zuckerberg,
but
not anymore,
there
but like,
there wasn't, right?
yeah, like
Good luck finding a CEO without gray hair. Good luck finding a CEO with hair,
yeah,
right?
right,
Back
exactly,
then.
right. And so I look at that and I say, man, there was a time when we couldn't even conceive that a 22-year-old could possibly be the CEO
Yeah,
of
right.
anything, right? And within 5 seconds, they were the CEO of everything, right? Now, here's where that gets really interesting. What really happened is that inspired lots of other 20-something year olds to say, oh shit, that's a thing now. I can be a CEO. Right?
Yeah.
I didn't have that benefit. Like I was at the dawn of that. So when I walked into a client's office, because I was running an agency, I was a sideshow to people. They were like, "Look at him, he's still got pimples," right? And I was like, "Yep, great." Like I couldn't have been more
I got a
disrespectful.
lot of dad suit questions,
Oh
right? Is
yeah,
that is that your
exactly, right?
dad's? Is
Yeah,
that your
yeah,
dad's
yeah.
shoot? Yeah.
The intern's here. When's the CEO showing up?
Yeah, God, yep.
So, but I guess what I'm saying is, but now that's not a thing anymore. What changes is stigma. Okay. A couple things happen. Number one, I think the most important thing is fuck that guy. If he can do it, I can do it. I think that is such an important argument, right? Because it drives a lot. The second is this greed of Mr. Beast has a channel. He makes hundreds of millions of dollars. Dude, I'm going to
Yeah,
create a channel, right? And that greed to get it done. But the most important is this is even possible. This is even possible.
yep,
Wait for the next few years where you see 1, 2, 3 person companies become $100 million companies.
yep. And we'll see it.
And all of a sudden, people are like, wait, I could do that with 3 people? Like, I don't have to
Yeah,
go raise VC or learn all this business stuff everybody's talking about. I'm in, which is exactly what happened in the creator economy. Like, everyone said,
yeah,
wait, I can do that? Sure.
yeah,
Yeah, you can make a
yeah.
makeup
The
channel. You're
barriers to
good.
entry, cost of the equipment, cost of everything just went to as close to zero as possible. And in many cases, like you just happen to already have it sitting around, right? You already had a laptop, you already had a phone. Now you have everything you need to have a creator studio.
Yep.
Cool.
I got this great guy that I follow, a woodworker. It's called Bourbon Moth Studios. He's just, kind of like this gregarious woodworker guy, right? He's actually very telegenic. But anyway, he has another show that he does that he talks about the production of the show. And I think he's got like 1 million followers on YouTube, or did years ago. So I'm sure he has more now. He's like, everybody asks me, like, what kind of production I'm doing on this thing, like to keep up with it and what my team's looks like. He's like,
Yeah.
dude, I have like an $8 app on my phone. He's like, the whole show is me
Huh?
putting my phone on a tripod, hitting record, and then editing on my phone and hitting upload. He's like, that's it. That is the entire production cycle, right? And yet this is his full-time job now. I think what we're going to see with a lot of folks is they realize that what they need is already in their pocket, so to speak. And it's kind of what I said a moment ago. it's going to be a combination of greed, like, hey, screw that guy, I want to be able to make that kind of money, in fear. Like, if I don't do this, I don't really have another choice. Like, I need income. So this is what I do.
Yep. Yeah, if you get ejected from the cubicle, something's got to give, right? Because there's a lot of people that are feeling this is like a wave, right? Meaning that there's this thing coming to hit them, and it doesn't feel like that to me. It feels like the sea level is just rising across the board, which yes comes with some downsides, right? You got to move to higher ground, but I think that's what we're going to start to see, right? It's going to force that, but I think we're going to start to see that. And like in your mind, what breaks first? Like what actually breaks when founders 100x like education, regulation, funding, right? Like what actually breaks there? One of the challenges, one of the pushbacks that I've gotten to all of this, because and like when we were talking about the devil's advocacy before, I was on
Yeah.
the other side of it in the last round, so I can't argue against it. I'm like I know how to argue the for side, I don't know how to argue
Yeah.
against it. But in this case, one of the pieces of pushback was, look, if we start running more and more big businesses, right? So if you got 3 people doing 150 million or $200 million company, what about the people they would have employed before? And so can everybody do that? Maybe not. Like, where does the money come from? Isn't there kind of a zero-sum game here? So if it starts getting, if we start collecting more money into less businesses, less employment, who actually buys this stuff? Right. And so a big part of the question is like the order of operations here, right? So if we start to make, education either way cheaper, way more accessible, or just unnecessary, what breaks, right? What about, things like regulation of how these things happen? Does funding break? Do we even need it anymore? Like, what are some of the outcomes? What are some of the pitfalls going to be as we start to see this thing move? Because it will, right? And where, I guess, really what I'm looking for, like the rate limiting factors in your mind.
Yeah. Well, I think one of them is the fact that you're going to have exponentially more companies out there with smaller staffs. If we take ourselves as a microcosm at startups.com, we don't really have a single open hire right now, because if we did, we're not sure what we'd do with them. And Ryan, you and I were talking about this earlier. With the stuff we're about to build next year, like the stuff we're about to do for startups.com is like next level.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, you and I have been around a long time. We've seen nothing like what's about to come out. And the resources that it would have taken us to do this 2 years ago would be like 400 people, to get this done, right? And so when I think about, like, again, this is the germinating effect. Startups.com, we're going to work next year and beyond to create so many more startups, like 10x the number of startups. We're going to take the costs of starting down to near zero. So we're talking like legal and corporation, like all that boring stuff, but more importantly, the stuff you spend more money on, like branding and logo development and marketing and funding and like all this stuff. And we're going to make it so much faster, cost damn near zero, and do so many things for you that even if you just have a shitty idea, we'll be able to build a real business out of it for you in a short period of time. Now, I say this to say, think of how many new businesses we're going to help create. Like, it blows my mind to think of the net impact of what we're about to do. But it also blows my mind to think that we need so few resources to make that change.
That's the crazy part, right? And I think that carries over, right? So then there's a long tail to that as well, which is as we start to lower the cost of failure, we raise the rate of tries.
Correct.
And so all of a sudden you're going to see this exponential increase in the number of people who are building, not just out of necessity, but I think out of desire. I think at some point people are going to look at this and go like, okay, so I used to look at entrepreneurs and go, man, I like a lot of what they've got there. Like, I like the idea that there's some time freedom. I like the idea that they're working on shit they really care about. I like the idea that they get to pick who sits next to them in the tank, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't like the fact that like it meant going a couple of years without income. I don't like the idea that the income could just go away. I don't like the idea, right? So there's all of these other pieces that I think that because so much of that failure cost, we're tied up in things that just don't cost anything anymore or are more easily avoided because we have visibility, we can validate, we can do all these other things that used to just have to come by, build it first and then push it out and then see what happens when the weather hits it. We can simulate all that now. We can move so much faster and so much further with very little risk and cost. I think the biggest thing that I'm seeing right now in the startup market that's changing the fastest is certainty, which is kind of cool at a time where pretty much everybody is scared shitless because of the uncertainty about what's going to happen. I'm actually seeing a rise in the certainty of what you can now go and do as a founder, which I think is going to empower a hell of a lot of people, do a hell of a lot of cool stuff.
Let's build on that. because I think one of the major shifts you're going to see that come out of this is the greatest rise in entrepreneurship that we have ever seen on a global level. I think the global level is the important one because up until now, even for as much as things were go from the 90s till about now with entrepreneurship, and this is of course a very American view, but I believe that most of that came from the US and maybe it didn't, but that's how I saw it 'cause I've been here.
Sure.
I think there was a bit of a moat that got created. We see this all the time with founders that come to us looking to raise money. They're like, "Hey, startups.com, can you guys help me understand how to raise money? But I'm in Bangladesh." Like, "Oh,
Yeah.
probably not." Right? And not really, but like it's going to be exponentially harder. Or you're coming from Africa, or you're coming from Australia, or coming from. And again, I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm saying the cost and time to do it is a lot higher. Okay. But what if you didn't need that money to begin with? What if the very thing that was preventing you from getting started just goes away, right? That's where it gets really interesting. I'm going to go back to the creator analogy. If 10, 20 years ago, you needed to have a production studio and a bunch of people in distribution and relationships with networks, et cetera, in order to get your show distributed, and now you can like my bourbon moth woodworking guy just recorded on your thing and have a million people following you. There's
Yep.
just no barrier. Well, now a lot of people can start. My son got started, right? He's got his channel. He has exactly 9 subscribers so far. We refuse to tell
Okay.
anybody what the
Yeah.
channel is, so that might be part of it. But the idea is it took him 5 seconds to get started. Now, here's the other side. And his cost of failure is very low. Now, it's a bit of a straw man argument for a 9-year-old because he has no consequence of failure. But what I started to see with Shopify stores, with how quickly you could get up and running as a retailer, with Etsy stores, how quickly you
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
get up and running as an individual, with gig economy work, whether it was Instacart to Uber, et cetera, or Upwork for that matter, how
Yep.
quickly you could get engaged and start making money from your
Yeah. Yeah.
services directly. All of those things are the equivalent of what's about to happen, except now all of those things are going to be people starting their own stuff, right? I
Yep.
mean, you could argue that an Etsy seller is by all means a small business, right? And so I think you're going to see so many more people offer their thing, right? Whereas maybe you worked in a team of 100 accountants doing accounting, you're now a team of 3 accountants doing accounting, right? You're doing the same
Yeah.
stuff. You're still doing accounting. You're
Yep.
probably using different tools, but it's with a smaller team. I think instead
Yeah,
of
because
startups
you
of
no longer
100
need
people, you'll
like
see
pooled
10.
resources, pooled assets to have a competitive advantage or to have even to be able to be at a cost where you can afford to deliver at any level.
Yep.
Right. And I think once that goes away, then it just opens so many doors because again, to your point, like imagine just go back again, 15, 20 years, woodwork guy couldn't have produced that show. Not only would there been nowhere to distribute
There
it,
was Bob Vila for 40 years. That was it.
Bob
Him
Vila
and
for
Norv
40
Abrams would do
years,
all the
right?
work.
Because he got one of those coveted network slots, right? He
Yep.
got the distribution side and he had an entire production team. Imagine what a single episode of that cost versus imagine the cost that it's woodworking guy's time and nothing more, right? An $8 app.
If I think if we zoom out and we say this isn't a matter, none of this is a matter of when it's going to happen, like pretty soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a matter of how big this thing gets and how
Right.
transformative it becomes. I think for a lot of founders where they're like, yeah, it's bullshit. Again, I think that argument's harder and harder to stick behind. And it's a losing argument. Like if you think AI bad, I want to stay away from it, I want to avoid it. Dude, I've been through this. I watched it happen when the computer stuff happened. I watched it happen when the internet stuff happened, right? You lose every time, right?
Yep.
It's you don't want to be on the wrong side of this argument. I buy all of
Yeah.
the arguments of what AI can do wrong. I agree with all of them, right?
Yep.
And you don't want to be on the wrong side of this. Our right side at startups.com is we're going to build the engine that builds millions of engines. We're going to build the engine that makes it easier than it's ever been to start a company, to scale a
Yep.
company, to operate a company, so that more founders don't need capital, right? And, certainly not in the same way. No one's going to miss kissing the asses of venture capitalists. I'm sure they'll find other people to throw money at. We're going to create an environment where people with just a decent idea, it doesn't have to be big idea. It could be, hey, I'm going to have the raspberry lemonade, right? I'm going to mix 2 lemonades, right? And that's the idea. It's enough. Just like the creator company, there's a market for that, right? And that's exciting to me. I think, for a lot of people, that opens up doors that never existed before, especially in developing countries, which would have never had this opportunity.
Play it out. I mean, like think about what funding when funding becomes optional, right?
Mhm.
Then think about what ends up happening when revenue is greater than debt, which is greater than equity, and we can avoid dilution completely before we hit product market fit even,
Yep.
right? Imagine what happens.
Imagine what
Right?
happens.
Because again, like we avoid some of these scenarios where we see what otherwise would have been great businesses. They get to a point where they've taken on venture capital. They get to that mid-level income, right? They're now mid-sized revenue company. They can't make distributions to themselves or the team. They can't do anything they want to with their cash. Why? Because that won't pay back VC. They've got to grow. They got three outcomes. We can IPO, we can get acquired, or we can take on another round of liquidity and take another round and create liquidity, right? So all of a sudden, you have all these other options that just stay on the table, which is a huge part of de-risking it, right? If you could have even gotten the funding in the first place, that applies you could have gotten it in the first place, which most people just won't. Statistically, they won't, right? We take that off the table all of a sudden. That's just one vector. And just the cash reductions, we've talked about this on other episodes, you've touched on it today. But as we reduce the need, right, when we no longer need to build a massive moat with people, to do the marketing, a massive moat of people to build the technology, a bunch of cash to pay all those folks, all of a sudden, we don't have to think as big to achieve success. So we can actually aim small and achieve something really cool.
That's a big deal for an awful lot of people.
Yeah.
And I think what people are missing right now is they think that we're in the age of AI. And I understand that, right? AI is pervading everything in the same way we thought we're the age of the internet. But AI is just a tool. The reason it becomes meaningful, like what it creates in the world, comes from founders. It comes from startups.
Yep.
What we're about to be in is the age of the startup, where every single person has a meaningful shot to create a startup, their own dream, their own product, their own market in a way that we've never seen, at a scale that we've never seen before. And I got to tell you, as somebody, and I know you share this with me, Ryan, as someone who helps startups for a living and believes so strongly in founders, I feel like you and I have been waiting for this age for our entire life.
Overthinking your startup because you're going it alone? You don't have to, and honestly, you shouldn't, because instead, you can learn directly from peers who've been in your shoes. Connect with bootstrapped founders and the advisors helping them win in the Startups.com community. Check out the Startups.com community at www.startups.com to see if it's for you. Could be just the thing you need. I hope to see you inside.